Welcome. Today we have here with us in the studio Cedric Scholl. You're a fiduciary manager responsible investment from the pension investment company APG. And you came today to talk to us about ABP's sustainable investment policy. Welcome. Can you say a little bit about who you are and what's your role?
Certainly. So my name is Cedric Scholl. I'm indeed a fiduciary management manager responsible investment for APG. APG is a asset manager and fiduciary to several pension funds, including ABP, the Dutch pension fund for the public sector. Mm-hmm. And in that capacity, I advise clients such as ABP on their sustainable and responsible investment policy. And my focus is primarily on biodiversity, impact investing, and private markets.
Thank you. Okay, so we're here today to talk about sustainability policy for the pension fund. Yet some people would say, well, is sustainability actually something a pension fund should do? Should you not just make as much money as possible for your clients?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. So I want to say a couple of things about this. So first of all, pension funds have the fiduciary duty to act in the interest of their beneficiaries. So that is ensuring a good pension, of course, and to that extent also aiming for investments that generate attractive risk-adjusted returns, but also are invested sustainably and at acceptable cost rate. Secondly, there is a persistent misunderstanding that sustainable or responsible investments generate lower returns than other investments, whereas the vast majority of scientific research shows that there is either no effect on risk return or maybe even a slightly positive effect on risk return. And then finally, our clients, including ABP, do consult with their beneficiaries to understand what their preferences are. So they question them on how they would like their pensions to be invested, including also how sustainable. And the majority of their beneficiaries actually say those pension assets have to be invested in a sustainable way. So that also mandates our clients to invest those assets in that way.
Okay, so it makes sense to work on sustainable investment. I think you convincingly argue for that. And then when we read the sustainability policy of ABP, mm-hmm. You kind of refer to global environmental agreements as a way to define what is sustainability, or how do you do that? So could you say a bit more about what are the standards and benchmarks internationally, but maybe also mm-hmm. nationally, that you use to set kind of goals and sustainability targets for ABP?
Yeah, certainly. So our clients' policies are based on widely accepted international standards to basically measure or determine what is sustainability and what it is not. You can think of course, the Paris Agreement on climate change. You can think of the Global Biodiversity Framework, but also social standards such as the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises and the UN Global Compact. And both APG and our clients are also signatories of the UN PRI, which are the principles for responsible investment. So there's a wide variety of standards that are basically the core of their responsible investment policies.
Okay. Well, when you look at such standards, especially like global agreements, they tend to be a bit general or abstract. Mm-hmm. So they set sustainability goals for far away. But what are the more practical instruments you have as financial institutions to realize such goals? So what are the major investment portfolios that you use?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe it's good to tell that our clients are invested in a wide variety of different asset classes. So that includes listed equity, for example, and corporate bonds, but also sovereign bonds, well known. But they're also invested in alternatives. So that means that they're invested in real estate, in infrastructure, in private equity, but also, for example, in agriculture and forestry. And when it comes to which instruments can they use to basically implement their sustainability policy, they can, for example, and they do, adjust their investable universe. So they basically exclude companies from their potential investable universe if they don't meet certain minimum thresholds with regard to sustainability. There's also the instrument of exclusion, and that's particularly used for excluding certain controversial products from the investment portfolio, but also government bonds that don't meet a certain minimum threshold.
Okay.
And finally, also investing in with positive impact, so impact investing, where impact actually gets measured. We also assess to what extent investment contribute to the UN SDGs, and then active ownership, of course, because as a large shareholder or bondholder in companies or projects, you actually have quite some leverage over these companies. So you try to engage actively with them on sustainability issues and also vote, for example, on relevant shareholder proposals at AGMs.
Okay, so in a way, through divestment and active engagement and making specific decisions, you contribute to sustainability in a financial market.
Yeah.
When I read your sustainability policy, you mention one or more times the idea of society-wide sustainable transitions.
Mm-hmm.
So what role does a financial institution like ABP play in such a transition?
Yeah.
Can you say more about that?
Absolutely. So these transitions that we identify, for example, of course, the climate transition, but also nature and biodiversity, for example, deterioration, they affect, of course, the world, but they also affect the global economy. So a lot of economic activities depend on these systems being in place and being stable. For example, the World Economic Forum has estimated that over 50% of global GDP is dependent on basically nature. And we've done a similar assessment for our investment portfolio, which is invested globally, and found similar results, that the vast majority of the investment portfolio is in some way dependent on ecosystem services, for example, and over 50% is quite heavily dependent on ecosystem services. So risks to biodiversity, to nature, to climate do affect eventually also our investment portfolios, and institutional asset managers have to manage these risks, mitigate where possible, and in order to invest their pension assets on behalf of their beneficiaries. So that's one role. Another role I think that institutional investors have, and that's also how our clients see it, through their investments, they can also contribute to mitigating some of these negative effects. So they can invest, for example, in solutions to climate change. They can invest in solutions to the nature crisis. And actually, the Global Biodiversity Framework has a target 19, that says that by 2030, 200 billion has to be invested in these solutions. So in that way, our clients can contribute to that.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's clear, and it's also a lot. I think in your answer, you also mentioned nature, ecosystem services, biodiversity a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something more specific or than just sustainability.
Yeah.
So do you have specific goals or targets for deforestation or biodiversity loss? Could you say a bit more about that?
Yes, sure. So ABP has identified nature and biodiversity as one of their two core transition themes, and has also formulated targets for that topic. For example, by 2030, our investment portfolio has to contribute to halting and reversing biodiversity loss in line with the Kunming-Montreal framework. ABP also wants to eliminate deforestation from the investment portfolio. And then 10 billion has to be invested in companies or projects that contribute to biodiversity in a positive way, of which 1 billion have to be impact investments. So the positive impact of those investments has to be measured and basically proven. Yeah. Okay.
Could you give an example of such an impact investment?
Yes, we have, for example, recently invested in Noordzeker, which is a sort of consortium between APG, SSE Renewables, ABP, our client, and also in collaboration with Naturalis, where we are going to build a offshore wind farm in the North Sea in the Netherlands, which is going to contribute to, or actually green approximately 8% of the energy demand in the Netherlands, so a significant impact on climate change. But what makes this investment also special is that we are spending a lot of attention also to the biodiversity impact of that project. So both during the construction phase as well as during the operational phase, Naturalis is going to help us monitor on a detailed level the impact on biodiversity, and we'll also be implementing various solutions to sort of contribute to biodiversity when building and operating that wind farm.
Okay. So this is an impact investment you kind of developed yourself together with partners.
Yeah.
In an earlier talk we had, you explained to me that the opportunities for impact investments are rather scarce. It's not a very well developed market yet.
Mm-hmm.
Other than the project maybe you just described, what can you do, or what are the options for you to make this impact investment sector larger?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think with a client the size of ABP setting these ambitious targets for impact investing, I think we're really upscaling impact investing also to an institutional scale.
Yeah.
So this used to be a space where predominantly smaller sort of niche impact investors were active. And I think it's now also a space where more and more institutional investors are playing a role. And as ABP, we want to inspire others to follow suit, to contribute. But we're also actively partnering up with other organizations to actually build collaborations to create these impact investing opportunities when there are no sufficient opportunities in place. And the Noordzeker is an example of that. But you can also think, for example, of the Dutch real estate impact partnership that we have, ABP together with BPF Bouw, another pension fund client of APG, and Bouwinvest.
Okay, so maybe this also ties in a bit to this idea of a transition society-wide. Yeah. Okay, I think I heard you say a few minutes ago that we need to have 200 billion a year invested in biodiversity if we want to counter the trend of biodiversity loss.
Mm-hmm.
I think here you refer to the Financing Nature report from 2019 that mentions that gap, and actually it's a larger gap of 750 billion to 1,000 billion a year.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at those huge numbers,
Mm-hmm.
what does your 1 billion impact investment and 10 billion sustainable investment do? Is that enough?
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way: 10 billion investing in biodiversity solutions is really a significant amount, and 1 billion impact investing too. I think it's going to be pretty challenging to find enough investable opportunities for us. But let's be clear, even though our client ABP is one of the largest institutional investors globally with about 520 billion euros of assets under management, it's not the only player. So the entire market is estimated to be $145 trillion by 2025. So, we hope that by setting...
The whole global market.
So we hope that by setting ambitious impact investing targets and targets for investing in biodiversity, we can inspire others to follow suit. That first of all. But there will also be activities that are simply not attractive investment opportunities that don't generate market rate risk return, which is important for us to ensure pensions, where other parties have to step in. So that has to be done, for example, by the public sector, by governments, by international organizations, maybe foundations, other types of investors that can make concessions to their risk return profile. And I think governments also have the tools in their hands to incentivize investors to contribute to these solutions by prohibiting or adequately pricing in or in any other way disincentivizing negative impact on biodiversity. They ensure that these become automatically less attractive investment opportunities, whereas the solutions to these problems become more attractive.
Okay. Still, you talk a lot about solutions. It sounds wonderful, like a project that produces almost 10% of the Dutch energy needs.
Mm-hmm.
Yet critical groups in civil society sometimes express doubt that sustainable finance policy as such is effective, that this is the way to go to protect nature or to address ecological crises.
Yeah.
Can you assure the public that what you are doing really has an impact?
We are for sure trying to measure it, right? So especially with impact investing, we're measuring really the outcomes that our investments have on society and environment. We do that also on the negative impact side. Of course, we hear these concerns. We have a regular dialogue with beneficiaries, but also with civil society, with research institutions. So we continuously try to ensure that our policy actually is sound and is up to date with the latest insights. And of course, this also changes over time, right? So for a long time, for example, ABP has tried to use its influence to get fossil fuel producers to align with the Paris Climate Agreement. And finally concluded, our influence doesn't have the desired effect, at least not quick enough for us to be able to meet that agreement. So we decided to focus that scarce capacity now on the demand side of fossil fuels rather than those companies producing it. So yes, these views can change over time. If we see that another approach is more effective, we're always open to that feedback. So we keep on having this constructive dialogue with beneficiaries, NGOs, research institutions, governments, to collect that input and keep improving our policies.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. I think our time is already up. Thank you so much, Cedric, for coming to the studio and telling us a bit more about the sustainability policy of ABP.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks.